Today, colleagues, we have before us the Auditor General, and she's accompanied by Lynn Sachs, the Assistant Auditor General. Welcome, Ms. Fraser. Welcome, Ms. Sachs. And this is to review the estimates, the departmental performance reports, and the Office's reports and plans and priorities. And just, if I may, just before we start, before we hear from the Auditor General, as we all know, the Public Accounts Committee is that committee of the House of Commons that provides oversight to all government spending. In other words, to ensure Parliament, and through Parliament the Canadian people, that all government spending has been done with regard to economy, efficiency, and in compliance with all laws and regulations and policy directives. And in fulfilling our mandate, we rely very heavily on the work of the Office of the Auditor General and the staff that work there, and it wouldn't be a week go by that the auditor is not before this committee. But in addition, colleagues, the Public Accounts Committee also provides oversight to the Office of the Auditor General itself. In other words, it's our job to ensure that the budget and the monies allocated to the Office of the Auditor General are spent economically, efficiency, and again in compliance with all governmental laws and regulations and policy directives. So each year we meet with the auditor at around this point in time to review and examine her office's departmental performance reports, or in other words, that report to Parliament, how the office has spent its allocations and functions and how it's met its objectives. In addition, we review the office's plans, report on plans and priorities, how it looks to fulfill its mandate in the upcoming year or sometimes 3 years, and also to approve its estimates, the monies allocated by Parliament to operate the Office of the Auditor General. So having said those open remarks, I want to again welcome Ms. Sachs, Ms. Fraser, and Ms. Fraser, I understand you have some opening remarks, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are pleased to be here today and would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss our 2006-07 performance report and our 2008-09 report on plans and priorities. As you mentioned, I'm accompanied today by Lynn Sachs, Assistant Auditor General, who is responsible for our corporate services. Each year, we are privileged to contribute to Parliament's oversight of government spending and performance with the objective information, advice, and assurance that result from the audits that we conduct. As you know, we conduct 3 types of audit: financial audits, special examinations of Crown corporations, and performance audits. All of our audit work is conducted in accordance with the standards set by the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants. Our work is guided by a rigorous methodology and quality management framework and is subject to internal practice reviews and to external reviews by peers. All of this provides assurance that you can rely on the quality of our work. Au cours de l'exercice 2006-2007,
during the 2006-07 fiscal year, the period covered by our most recent performance report, we used $77.8 million of the $78.6 million in appropriations available to us and employed the equivalent of 610 full-time employees. Our net cost of operations, taking into account services provided without charge by other departments and other smaller adjustments, was $88.1 million. $88.1 million. Using these resources, the Office provided Parliament with 30 performance audits of federal departments and agencies, provided territorial legislatures with 2 performance audits on territorial matters, provided more than 120 financial audit reports to financial oversight bodies, including those of the Government of Canada, Crown corporations, the 3 territorial governments, and 2 international organizations, provided 4 special examinations of Crown corporations to their boards of directors, assessed the performance reports of 3 federal government agencies, assessed the actions of 21 federal organizations in implementing selected commitments from their 2001 and 2004 Sustainable Development Strategies, and finally monitored 37 environmental petitions. Our 2006-07 performance report contains a number of indicators of what the impact of our work is and what our performance measures are. The tables containing our targets and actual performance for these measures are attached to this statement, Appendix 1. In the 2006-07 fiscal year, performance highlights included the following. Parliamentary committees reviewed 63% of our performance audit reports, a significant increase from the previous 2 years. We participated in 64 committee hearings and briefings over the course of the 130 parliamentary sitting days, a record number for our office. Departments reported that they had fully implemented 46% and had substantially implemented 26% of the performance audit recommendations made in the reports we tabled 4 years ago. When we surveyed users of our reports, 94% indicated that our findings were reported in a fair and objective manner, and that our reports were clear and concise. This was the first year that we surveyed members of select parliamentary committees on their assessment of our work. We would like to thank you for your responses and are pleased that so many of you found our reports to be valuable. The indicators, however, reveal that we need to improve our performance in terms of budget versus actual cost of audits. We are taking a number of steps to improve the way in which we establish budgets and the management of individual audits.
Our 2008-2009 report on plans and priorities has just been tabled in the House of Commons. An appendix to this statement provides you with an updated list of our planned performance audits and special examinations for the coming years, and that is in Appendix 2. Let me take a moment and draw your attention to our priorities for this year. For a number of years to come, we will face challenges related to the core of our auditing and accounting practices. Recent decisions by standard-setting boards of the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants, that is, to adopt international standards on auditing in 2010 and international financial reporting standards in 2011, represent changes on a scale that is unprecedented in our profession in Canada. We will need to determine how the changes in auditing standards will affect the way we conduct audits and what impact the changes in financial reporting standards will have on the financial statements of the entities that we audit. We will need to adjust our methodology to take these changes into account, to train our staff, and to ensure that our audit tools continue to help us do our work efficiently. To respond to these challenges, the Office is developing a multi-year plan that will prepare us to carry out our work in this new environment. In that regard, I am pleased to inform the committee that I have been designated as the official representative of the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, known as INTOSAI, to the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board of the International Federation of Accountants. I have also been named as the chair of INTOSAI's Professional Standards Subcommittee on Accounting and Reporting. While I am very pleased to accept these positions, I do regret that they will cause me to be absent more often than usual. Nous poursuivrons nos efforts pour conserver.
We will continue to work to sustain our most precious asset, our staff. I am pleased that our office has been selected as one of Canada's top 100 employers and one of Canada's top 10 family-friendly employers for 2008. We hope to build on the success to retain and attract qualified employees. We are dedicating resources to ensure that effective recruitment and retention plans are in place. We are also focusing on compensation issues and on providing our staff with greater access to a variety of challenging opportunities. The ongoing retirement of a significant percentage of our staff means that, like other organizations throughout the public sector, we face the loss of corporate memory. In our 2008-2009 report on plans and priorities, in addition to these priorities, we also noted a concern that we want to address this year. Presently, management and other policies that government central agencies issue apply to officers of Parliament in the same way as they apply to government departments and agencies. This is a concern to us and other officers of Parliament. It does not recognize the independence of officers of Parliament and the management autonomy needed to protect our independence. For example, these government policies often provide a role for ministers or central agencies in the management and oversight of departments and agencies that are inappropriate for officers of Parliament. We are working with government officials to resolve the matter.
We have recently announced the appointment of Mr. Scott Vaughan as the new Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. Mr. Vaughan is an environmental economist who has more than 20 years' experience working on environmental and sustainable development issues for international organizations, such as the Organization of the American States, the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation, and the United Nations Environment Program. He will be joining the office on May 5th, and I look forward to presenting him to the committee at a future hearing. Finally, Mr. Chair, today you are being asked to approve our estimates for the 2008-9 fiscal year. We are seeking an additional $1.2 million to become the sole auditor for Via Rail for both its financial audits and special examinations as the result of a recent order in Council, and to undertake the audit of the International Labour Organization. It should be noted that we recover the costs of this audit. This amount of $1.2 million also includes a technical adjustment of $700,000 that is required to cover the costs of the employee benefit plan for increases to our staff over a number of years. A table summarizing the request is provided in Appendix 3 to this statement. We appeared before the panel on the oversight and funding of officers of Parliament in November 2007. The panel unanimously recommended the approval of this additional funding to the Treasury Board. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, my staff and I appreciate your ongoing interest in and support for our work, and we look forward to continuing to assist you in holding the government to account for its use of public funds. That completes my opening statement, and we would be most pleased to answer any questions that committee members might have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fraser. Merci beaucoup. We're now going to start the first round of 7 minutes each. Mr. Jesniski, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Madame Fraser, for appearing before the committee. And I thought I'd use this opportunity to thank you for the work your offices do. Without your reports and without your offices, we certainly couldn't hold government to account. And it's especially encouraging under point 17 when it's noted that notwithstanding the challenges that all government offices seem to be facing in regards to staff retirement and replacing that staff, that you've been noted as one of Canada's top 100 employers and a family-friendly employer. But our role isn't to laud here. Our role is to hold offices to account. And I'd like to zero in on a couple of problematic areas. The first is Crown corporations and the special investigations of Crown corporations that were done. I understand only 1 out of 4 were delivered on time. So that's problem number 1. I also note that in the last 6 years, the cost has gone from 3.8 to 7.7 million, so the cost has more than doubled on doing these special investigations, and that 0%, none of them actually met their budgeted number of hours. Can you explain what are the problems that your offices are having with these special investigations of Crown corporations? And I think it would also be helpful to use specific examples.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by explaining that special examinations of Crown corporations are required under the Financial Administration Act. A Crown corporation has to undergo this review every 5 years, and we have to give an opinion as to whether the systems and practices of the Crown corporation ensure that its operations are managed efficiently and effectively and assets are safeguarded. Up until now, reports, or until very recently, reports of these special examinations were provided to the boards of directors, and there was no requirement that they be tabled in Parliament or made public. In budget of 2004, government indicated its intention to require that they be made public. That is still not a requirement, but the Crowns are complying voluntarily. And I'm sure members will be interested to know in the report that we will be tabling next week, we will be giving a summary of special examinations over the last 5 years, but also publishing the summaries of specific special examinations that we have done during the last 2 years. And that we expect to do every year to provide parliamentarians with this information on the Crowns.
So what you're telling us is in 2 weeks' time, besides the actual reports, we'll receive the information on the budgeting for these special investigations, because your costs have more than doubled
if I could
doing
just
these investigations.
continue, yeah. We will be providing the summaries of the results of those special examinations. Our costs have increased for a number of reasons. First, the number of Crowns has increased. The number of special examinations that we are doing has increased. There are several new Crowns. For example, CATSA is a relatively new one that we have just completed this past about a year ago. As well, in the legislation in 2005, there were a number of Crown corporations that had been exempt from having special examinations, which now have to have them done. I believe that was another 7. As well, we have become auditors, for example, we are joint auditors of Canada Post, so we are now undertaking a special examination of Canada Post. And as well, the complexity of some of these Crowns has increased quite significantly.
Thank you. Perhaps we should take a look at, especially in mind of what you just said, that the number of audits are increasing. These are Crown corporations, that we should be recovering those costs of audits from the Crown corporations. That's just a quick suggestion, because I'd like to move on to another problematic area. I'll just note quickly, in point 22, you're saying you're seeking an additional $1.2 million. You gave 2 examples, and one of the 2 examples, well, via rail, and the second was an audit of the ILO, International Labor Organization, but you note that you will recover those costs. So I'm not quite sure why you're seeking additional monies to audit when you, in fact, will be recovering those audit costs. But let me move on to, because I've been told, I'd like to get a couple of quick questions.
You should allow an answer to your question.
I was hoping I could just put a couple of questions in a row.
Well, I already have a couple of questions that I haven't. We recognize, a member brought up earlier, the fact that we had not respected deadlines for special examinations. That is very troubling to us. And I can assure you that the results will be much improved this year. We are actually planning in all of the special examinations to finish 6 months before the statutory deadline. So budgets, I think we were actually far too aggressive in setting some of the budgets, and we need to go back and be more realistic about budgets, though there are some special examinations and some audits that get into issues that we had not foreseen and become much more difficult and require more time. On the recovery, we do charge for all of the audits that we do in the for United Nations agencies, but all those revenues go into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. We do not have authority, respending authority, and so because it goes into the Consolidated Revenue Fund, we need to have an appropriation to have that money come to the office.
Okay. Brief question, I'm being told. Last fall, there was a very problematic headline in the Ottawa Citizen. It said, "Audit catches Auditor General shirking rules, internal review finds Treasury Board guidelines on expense claims not followed." And in the text of the article, it said that meal allowance limits were not always being respected. Social events were possibly paid for by taxpayers outside of government policy, and documented pre-approval expenses of more than $5,000 were not being obtained as specified by Treasury Board policy. I understand that this particular internal audit was not posted. If you could tell us what has been done to rectify this situation, and whether or not this particular internal audit on hospitality could be tabled with our committee?
I believe, Chair, and I will check, but I believe that it is posted. It should be posted. All of our internal audits are posted on our website. And if it's not, I can assure you it will be immediately, and I would be more than pleased to provide a copy to the committee. One of the issues that was raised in that internal audit refers to the point that I was making about application of certain Treasury Board policies to agents of Parliament that we believe are inappropriate. And one of the examples is that in government, a minister has to approve all expenditures, hospitality expenditures over $5,000. The office has always taken the position as auditors of government, a minister should not be approving expenditures within our office. The largest expenditures we have are, for example, lockups around tabling of our reports, staff training, those types of issues, and we believe that it would be totally inappropriate for a minister to have the authority to influence whether that expenditure occurred or not. So that's one of the issues that's being raised about there is to my mind, no expenditure on social events that are not appropriate. There are, obviously, when we have conferences or people are out of town, we have to pay for meals. But beyond that, there is none of that. So that has been all reviewed and dealt with. The rules have been, I would say, reinforced by our internal finance people. But the question of having a minister approve hospitality expenses in our office to us is inappropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Monsieur Laforêt, 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Ms. Fraser and Ms. Sachs, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you and show my respect for and recognition for the international quality of your work, and I think that we're very fortunate to have a competent person like yourself. I think that the past year went by and we talk about accrual accounting. This is something that you've been asking for quite a few years, and we sort of harmonized the department and the government for accrual accounting. And we went to these meetings, and Treasury Board also was there. And you wanted the Auditor General's office to be a part of this process. So on a budget priority level for next year, have you thought or planned for anything, or do you think that there are going to be some extra costs coming in? How do you see the picture as a whole? Mr. Chairman, this issue revolves around votes, because the statements at the end of the year are based on accrual accounting and the summary budget as well. So the issue is that the votes are always on a cash rather than an accrual accounting basis. We work on a subcommittee made of the representatives of this committee here and of another committee, and we voiced our concerns regarding the approach adopted by the government. And recently, we saw the government's response. It does not seem to want to adopt an accrual approach for parliamentary votes. And this is a question that we're going to follow very closely. We're going to give our advice, and perhaps we'll even include this in our observations and public accounts and other such things. And we don't see that this is a very exhaustive work, or that would need supplementary funds. It's already a part of our job. In the audits you do in various departments, you can note that what works and what doesn't work. You can see all these things. And whatever the department might be, strategic communications always arise as an issue. We haven't included strategic planning in the department or in your office. Do you have strategic planning that takes into account the various constraints on your operations? There's an overall strategic plan, but there's also a human resources strategic plan. And do the comments of others help you to improve your methods? Yes, we do have strategic planning, and we update it every year. Of course, as I mentioned, the world is constantly changing, and the standards for accounting and auditing are changing in a significant way this year and will continue changing over the coming years. And this is a great challenge for us and also a challenge for human resources. Each year we set our priorities for the coming year and sometimes for several years, and then we make specific plans for human resources and for recruiting and for keeping people in their positions, and we try to see the turnover on a 5-year basis because we know that many people are about to leave and go into retirement. Another issue that often comes up when we deal with you or with your assistants, this is a strange issue, and I mean by this that you often do an audit in a department, whereas there was already an audit carried out within the past 4 or 5 years in the same department. And sometimes you see that recommendations were made and absolutely nothing was done to follow them. And the department says, oh yes, we agree with the recommendations, but nothing is being done. Do you think that, in a very general way, the government should take measures? Do you think that we should have more stringent measures, and who could apply these measures? Should we legislate more power to the Auditor General? Because I think these problems are cyclic. I think that this whole issue is based on the priorities that we adopt and the resources allocated to these priorities. Very often it's an issue of resources, and of course there are shifting priorities. And with the turnover of our personnel, which is quite a high turnover over the past few years, it seems that there is no common thread for activities. We finish some things and we start with something different. Well, I'm sure that since you've been there, you've made recommendations and audits to follow them up, and you've noted that nothing was done. Don't you feel a certain feeling of helplessness because nothing's changing? Answer: I'm a bit more optimistic because I do see that things change, and when recommendations are implemented, either completely or substantially, and about 75%, what I consider as substantial, and there are still, of course, elements left to do, and the department might respond that it takes a bit longer than we would like, but I will not hide the fact that in some departments things don't move ahead very fast, and it's very often issue of the attention paid to the issue by senior management or a resource issue. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Madam Fraser, Madam Sachs. It's great to see you both here, and of course it's always a pleasure to be able to sample your work and just have a few questions. And I'll just go to your opening remarks. You mentioned that on point number 4, our work is guided by a rigorous methodology and quality management framework and subject to internal practice reviews and external reviews. When was the last external review?
Our last external review of our performance audit practice, the report was released in early 2004. We do have reviews of the Provincial Institutes of Chartered Accountants on the financial audit practice almost every year because we are accredited to have students for the various professional accounting organizations. But the last one was in 2004, and we're actually preparing. I would like to have an external peer review done before the end of my term, which would not be practice specific. Up until now, it's been financial audit or performance audit, that it would cover the whole office. So we are working to get that underway.
That was going to be my next question, so that's good. That review, will it be of the same magnitude and complexity that your performance or your departmental performance audits are on other departments?
Essentially, well, what has happened in the past when we had the review done of both the financial audit practice and the performance audit practice, where the teams of auditors reviewed our quality management framework to assess if it was adequate and complete, and then they assessed if it was actually operating as intended. So it would be the kind of same, yes, but this time it will be broader because it will cover all of the practice areas and could get into more of the issues like human resources or finance or those kinds of issues as well.
Okay. And on the same subject, but going to a different document to talk about it, on page 26 and 27 of your performance audit, congratulations, by the way, in your quality management framework that it's working. But I would be delinquent if I didn't ask you this question. There were 3 internal audits that were slated and then canceled. What was the reasoning behind that?
It was a question of resourcing. The priority goes to reports to Parliament, and when we have staff turnover or people leave, other things have to get cancelled in order to complete the audit work that we have scheduled.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask a different question, but now that you've answered in that way, in your opening remarks, you're talking about substantial changes that are going to be required in order to meet international standards, and you already have quite a full slate. You've asked simply for $1.5 million. Have you budgeted? I take it that you've taken it into account, but it concerns me just on a quick look that $1.5 million alone, when there's already been a couple of other issues discussed where there was a lack of resources, that you may find yourself running tight again.
Well, I should remind the committee that last year we did ask for additional funding in order to increase what we call our professional practices group, which is methodology, quality reviews. So we have staffed up that group and are actually in the process still of increasing the staffing in that area. The other thing we have to do is, of course, wait to see what the impact of all of this is going to be. It's not affecting us right now. We have begun discussions with some of the national firms and are considering going out for a request for proposal to have a strategic alliance with one of the national firms that would provide us with training, methodology development, because quite honestly we're too small to do it all ourselves. So that is in the work and will be under consideration this year. That will be a major initiative. That is for the, if you will, the auditing standards. The accounting standards that are coming in are going to involve our staff, but are really much more of an effort on the part of the Crown corporations, who are going to have to adopt all of this. And we have already begun information sessions with them to try to sensitize them to the fact that they have to be moving on this quite quickly. So I do see that we will be needing additional resources going forward. There is another initiative, too, that is going to begin this year, very small is audited departmental financial statements. There will be a pilot this year. If all goes well, that department will be audited and an opinion will be issued next year, but we see the number ramping up quite significantly. So what we want to do is get a sense of it this year to be able to better assess what this will entail from us, and then we will come back with a more, I think, reasoned and articulate request for additional funding for that.
Okay. A question about, you do the does your department do the surveying on as far as follow-up for departments and implementing your recommendations? Is it staff in your office that do that?
We actually ask the departments to indicate to us what they have done, and then our departmental audit teams assess that for sort of reasonableness, but we don't go out and audit, for example, if those responses are correct. We use the information that we have either from our follow-up audits or from just the knowledge of the department as to how they're going about that.
What about when do you ask them directly from your department, or is it a paper survey, or when you're asking them about the value of your audit for their purposes, do you do that directly? Do you have a third party do that?
We do that directly, though that is a specific group in the office, and the responses come to me directly.
Have you ever had a third party do it just to audit whether there be a significant difference from an independent organization asking the questions compared to your office?
I would be certainly glad to look at that. We haven't done that yet, but we would certainly consider doing that.
I'm just wondering if their responses may be somewhat different if
well, the responses are not always positive, as you can imagine. They tend to be pretty departments can be pretty blunt about their assessment of our work at times, so I don't know that it would be
I can't imagine.
I don't know that if it would be very different. We, of course, use an outside firm to do the surveys of parliamentarians because we think that we need to have that objective, independent person doing that review. But the departments and all the Crown corporations, we do it internally, but that's something we could consider, sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Fraser. Mr. Christopherson, 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Auditor and Assistant Auditor. For the record, let me just say that you continue to enjoy the respect and the support of myself as the NDP representative of our caucus.
Thank you.
You do an excellent job, and as opposition members, we need the tools that you provide us, and I think there's a good relationship there, and I just want to compliment you again on the work that you do. I think you're serving Parliament and Canadians well. Having said that, let's look at where we can make some improvements. I note in your comments, your opening statements, you talk about, and I'll quote, departments reported they had fully implemented 46% and had substantially implemented 26% of the performance audit recommendations. That means that 54% haven't fully implemented them, and over a quarter have not even substantially implemented. And I got to tell you, Auditor General, that's not a good number. I don't find that over half failing at what we've set out to do to be anything to brag about. So I know that this committee, for the first time in the history of Parliament, has taken the initiative to put in place an accounting procedure whereby we now have staff people report back to us over a period of time on who is making gains and recommendations and who isn't and why not. And in the past, as you know, those recommendations were made and they just went out there into the darkness, and they may or may not, and probably not, come back ever to be seen again. So we both have an interest in ensuring that we have a better uptake. But I don't see this as anything to say that we're there. So in light of this failure on both our parts, where half are not having fully implemented the recommendations, what else do you think we can do? Or are you expecting our new tracking mechanism and some changes you've made, do you think that that's going to give us some results in the next couple of years? Because we really can't go around continuing to pretend that half a failure is anything to be happy with.
I agree, Mr. Chair, that the numbers should be much higher. I must admit I was a little disappointed because the Treasury Board Secretary at one point did a whole analysis or supposedly conducted a review as to why the numbers were not higher. We never saw a copy of that review, nor I believe that this committee, because it really is, I believe, you know, it's in part our responsibility, in part the responsibility of the committee, but it really is up to government to be saying, if they agree with these recommendations, why aren't departments putting them, why aren't they doing them? And I would have expected the Treasury Board Secretariat, quite frankly, to have been more active in that. I am hopeful going forward with the introduction of departmental audit committees with independent external people on these committees, that they are also tasked with looking at implementation of recommendations and following up with departments, and that too might bring more focus to this. But to be quite honest, there are some departments that are very difficult, where recommendations are not put into practice, even though they have agreed. It comes back, and we've tried, at least in one of our audits, to try to focus on why are some recommendations put into practice and others not. In many cases, it's simply senior management attention. It can be resources as well, and changing priorities. And I guess I'm at a bit of a loss to say what more we can actually do. We are going to try to work very closely with the departmental audit committees to raise this as an issue and to ensure that they do the follow-up that we would expect.
Good. Well, I know on our part, certainly this makeup of the committee is determined that that number is going to go up. You go to all that work. We spend all that taxpayers' money. We do all that work. We hold all the hearings. You know, I think we do some good nonpartisan work here. We have our moments, but mostly we try to be nonpartisan, and then nothing happens. And so I'll remain positive that we'll get there, but it's going to be a continuing challenge. And if, Chair, if I could ask the clerk to make a note, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion that we request that particular Treasury Board report that the auditor referred to. That'll come up at the end. Next, congratulations on being the official representative. I love the name of this organization, the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, and you would be their representative to the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board of the International Federation of Accountants. Wow. Good thing you don't have to wear that on a re-election button, let me tell you. And then further, you've been named as another chair, and I won't get into that acronym, but you do acknowledge that you'll be away a little bit as a result of that, which tweaks my question. Number one, I'm pleased you're there. I think that that's important. Not so much for you personally, although that's a part of it, but more importantly, Canada needs to be there. How we interact with the world is different than the rest of the world in terms of our needs because of our geography, our economy, the fact that we have people virtually from everywhere on the planet. So, and Canada trying to be seen as the ones that are helpful to the world in terms of developing civil society, etc. So I'm big on us being there. We need to be out in the world if Canada is going to be as successful as it can be. Having said that, having served at 3 orders of government, I do know that from time to time there are senior managers who join so many provincial, national, and international organizations that their main job starts to become a smaller and smaller part of the work they do, and they're out there doing great grandiose things, but they're not an ambassador, and they've sort of become that. Now, you have a unique position in that there's no one individual that you report to, being an officer of Parliament. So your thoughts on, not at all you personally, but how do we gauge as the accountable body to the person in your position or others, and I would extend this even to deputies and senior managers, although the minister is responsible, but what kind of criteria do you think there should be in terms of how a senior person like yourself divvies up their time between their main responsibilities and some of these more external ones, recognizing that as politicians, we do that all the time too, as we're delegates to various bodies. But your thoughts on that, please.
Well, I can only speak for myself and the office, and certainly any activity that we undertake internationally, even within Canada, has to clearly align with our international strategy. We have developed an international strategy.
I'm sorry, when you say our international strategy, your department or the country?
The
your
office.
Okay.
Obviously, certain elements of that are related to the policies of the government. For example, when we decide to bid on an audit of an agency of the United Nations, for example, that is clearly done in agreement with and actually often at the suggestion of Foreign Affairs. We do not go off and do this on our own. When we are in, so we have different components to our international strategy. One is to help develop, to assist Canada's efforts in building governance structures abroad. And on a very limited basis, we will do that. For example, we are helping in a project that CETA is undertaking to establish an Auditor General in Mali. So I just actually had some of our communications people were just there a week ago to help them. But those tend to be fairly small, limited activities. The other big activities would be the UN audits. We are down now to 1, whereas we've had 2 in the past. And then the other, we put as a strategic objective to be involved in standard setting, given the importance of international standards to us. So that is why I went on to that board, and we have people involved in standard setting within Canada. And other than that, that's pretty much it, except for example, INTOSI, which has a certain number of, it has a Congress every 3 years, or the Commonwealth Auditors General, which has a Congress every 3 years. Other than that, that's pretty much it. So it has to be directly related to the work. I cannot either accept to be on boards of organizations outside Canada without going through the Ethics Commissioner, and I can tell you, quite frankly, I don't have the time to do it. So it's limited. It's very close, strictly limited to that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fraser. I just want to deal with Mr. Christopherson's request before I forget it. I take it's a motion from Mr. Christopherson requesting from the Treasury Board Secretary their review report of departmental implementation of the Auditor General's recommendations. Moved by Mr. Christopherson. I assume everyone's in agreement with that. Put it to a vote. All in favor? All in favor, raise your hands. Against? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Holland, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Madam Fraser, for appearing before the committee yet again. I just wanted to start, if I could, with this notion that there's a failing grade, because I want to go into those numbers. You have 26% that were significantly implemented, which is a decrease and a concern. And yet you had about, I think it was 46% of recommendations that were fully implemented. So 72% of recommendations were either fully implemented or implemented to a significant degree. Now, you had mentioned through questioning, I think rightfully, that departments don't always agree with your recommendations. And I know from previous appearances at committee, you've acknowledged that you have recommendations, and those recommendations may or may not be agreed with. And there may be ways of explaining why they disagree with your recommendations that are legitimate. Where I'm really concerned is the number of, because I think what gets this committee upset is when we have agencies that come before us or departments that come before us that have agreed with your recommendations and they come back and they haven't done anything. I mean, that's the ones I'm concerned with. So if we were to take a look at that number and we were to say, more specifically, those who say, yes, the auditor's completely right, we have to do these things, we have to engage it. I mean, how many are we dealing with that aren't following even their own agreement with your recommendation that change needs to occur? And how do we go after those ones? Because those are the ones that frustrate us, if we're to be really honest about it.
If I could just clarify, the statistics that are given are for recommendations with which departments agreed. With which departments agreed.
Agreed, okay.
We would not expect a department to implement a recommendation with which they didn't agree.
Right, okay.
The basis of this is to say how many, 4 years after the recommendation has been made, how many have been implemented or substantially implemented. I would say I think over the past 4 years we have all become much more rigorous in asking departments when they agree to produce an action plan, to be specific about how they're going to deal with the recommendations, who is responsible for it, and what's the timeline. So I am hopeful with some of those changes, and as well with the committee also doing the follow-up and the tracking, that we will see an improvement over time. I think we have to recognize it will never be 100%. No. It's impossible that it be 100%. But I would like to see, I think, the percentage of actually implemented go up. I find the 46 is too low.
Of that, 72%, you can understand the 26%, although it's a decrease of 9%, which is a concern. You can understand that of that 26%, some of them have significantly implemented them. How many have not implemented anything at all? I didn't see that statistic. Is there what percentage over that 4-year period of those that agreed with your recommendations didn't do anything?
Well, didn't do anything. I don't know that we actually know didn't do anything. We say neither fully nor substantially. It's about 25%.
About 25% who did it may have done something, but may have been cosmetic or small.
Yeah.
See that? I mean, you're right. We can't expect 100%, but I certainly would think that we should be able to expect of all agencies or departments that agree with your recommendations, that they would be on the path to meeting their own word, to meeting their own commitment. And to have 25% of them not is deeply concerning. So the question is, aside from bringing them back and and asking them tough questions, and then presumably and hopefully being embarrassed by their lack of action, what do you think needs to be done, either by committee or by yourself or by Parliament, to hold people to a different standard? Because while we can't expect 100% to have fully implemented the recommendations, we should expect 100% to be well on the path to implementing what they accepted as your recommendations.
I agree. As I mentioned, I would hope that these departmental audit committees will help to focus attention on it. And the government as well, I think, has to assume more responsibility, perhaps central agencies, as to doing the tracking and why are some. And I think we can probably focus, actually, there are probably a few areas that are more problematic than others. I honestly think in some cases it's a question of senior management attention, and it's also a question of resources. I don't think we can completely ignore that, and that comes back to government policy decisions about what departments are going to get funding and what aren't, and what issues are going to get attention and which ones aren't. And those decisions and priorities change over time. So we can perhaps try to give more analysis to the committee when we do our departmental performance report this year as to which areas perhaps are more problematic, though I would rather do it on perhaps broader strokes, because I hesitate to point specific departments, because at times there's maybe only one audit, and that's maybe not representative of the progress they're making in a number of areas. But I think there are a couple of areas that we can see where progress is not as good as we would like.
I would agree with your assessment that, generally speaking, it would be the issue would be one with the management team within a department not paying adequate or sufficient attention to the recommendations that you made and they accepted and they promised to fix. I mean, you didn't mention anything in there about maybe what we would do with management team. I mean, if somebody makes a commitment to undertake to make changes that obviously you deemed important enough to write a report about, they deemed important enough to say, yes, it's a problem, we're going to fix it, and they don't do anything, should there not be a consequence to that? I mean, do you feel that there should be some consequence to that if the problem rests with the management team and the lack of will of a management team to move forward?
I think that often the question is more complex than simply that. I mean, obviously it's the attention that the management team gives to it, but we have to understand that they may have been given other priorities. And have they been given the sufficient resources to be able to resolve the issue that is before them? And that's perhaps a question when we do our follow-up audits, when we come before the committee, that the members might want to ask them why. Did you have enough resources to fix this issue? What were the other priorities that you had? I mean, we have seen it in some cases that there were other priorities that came.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess the point that I'm getting is certainly if there's legitimate reasons. I mean, one wouldn't hold that against the management team. I guess it's just there are those occasions, and they are admittedly rare. They're not the rule; they're the exception. where it's just extremely frustrating, and I'm sure it is for you, it is for the committee, when you get individuals who come in and they've just completely ignored it. They haven't taken any action. And if you don't have a cause and effect relationship, it's hard to see how it's going to change. The last question I had, realizing the time is running short, has to do with something within the supplementary information of the performance report. And it lists the audits that were completed, the performance audits that were completed in 2006 and 2007. But it notes that 5 performance audits were canceled. I just didn't see immediately why those audits were canceled, specifically and more generally, what would be some of the reasons that a performance audit would be canceled once undertaken?
We have to recognize that even the list we gave you today, these are in some cases broad areas that we want to look at, and we haven't gone down into the actual scoping, we call, of the audit. So at times when we actually do more detailed work, we decide that that's not an area we should look at. We should perhaps be looking at another area. So we will change the focus of the audit. Maybe the same department, it could actually be in other departments. We might say, well, no, or the timing may not be right. There may be legislative changes coming, regulations that are going to change, changes within the department, and so the audit, the timing is not appropriate. There can at times, quite honestly, be issues with resourcing, that we have the skills to do it at a point in time when we initially planned it, but those people may have left the office, or we may be rebuilding a team, or we may decide that we are going to shift resources from one area to another area given that something has happened. So the plans, we try to obviously stay as close to these plans as we can, but at times as two committee requests will come up and we'll say, yes, we should be doing more work in this area, and we will move a team from one area to another. So the plans will change. So even the list of audits that we are presenting here today, I'm not guaranteeing that those will all be done within the time frame that we are put forward.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Thank you, Mrs. Fraser. Mr. Fitzpatrick, 7 minutes.
Good morning. I guess I'm going to try to get into how you pick your special projects. I was looking through some of the special projects, and one that I was kind of looking for, but it wasn't there, is the CMHC and the mortgage insurance side of things in Canada, because I think we're all quite aware that when the train wrecks happen in the economy and so on, we find out whether systems work or not. And the U.S. has got no end of problems right now with their equivalents, their Fannie Mae's and so on. And I do know that even though in maybe central Canada and eastern Canada the housing market has been fairly stable, but out west I can vouch for the fact that housing has went up dramatically, almost on a scale equivalent to some markets in the U.S., 50% increases in 1 year and so on. And I guess really I'm wondering, and I guess the question is maybe you could comment on why something like this wasn't included as a special project, and maybe you could comment on the process you employ to determine what projects you do study.
I'd be glad to. The specific issue that has been raised, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, we would cover that in the special examination of that Crown Corporation. And you will see on the list that we gave, we are actually on, that is a special examination that is underway now, and we will be reporting within the next year. So that we will certainly look at that issue in the context of that special examination.
Any idea when that one would come out?
I believe we have to table that one. I can find out. I can give it to you. May 2009. Okay. So that will be coming. They will be made public sometime next year, and we will be reporting to Parliament on the results of that probably in spring of 2010. But for the departments and agencies, what we do is we go through a risk-based approach. We try to determine the major risks to the department or agency of it to accomplish its mandate. We will also do that as well on cross-cutting issues, be it human resources, IT management, information management. We were just doing one actually the other day on the Department of Finance and OSFI and the whole financial regulatory system, and saying, okay, what are the biggest risks in there? How would we audit those risks? And then we develop a plan over 5 years. And then, of course, after that, we have to sit down and say, how many can we actually do in a year? And what skills do we have, and how do we stagger them depending on our resourcing? So that's really generally how we pick the audits to do. There are, of course, the committee requests which come in, which we assess, and we try to accommodate to the extent that we can.
Another area I'm kind of interested in, I'm sure you've explained this before, but I'm the type of person that you have to explain things 2 or 3 times maybe before it registers, but the status of crown corporations in the picture, you know, in a more simplified world, to me, crown corporations are simply agents of government, and they have a mandate to carry out government mandates or policies, and in that sense, as a member of Parliament, I view them very much in the same light that I would view any agency or department in terms of accountability and knowing what's going on and so on. I guess the question I'm asking you, are you happy at this stage with the degree of accountability and control that government has over crown corporations?
That's actually not an issue that we have had particularly concerns about, given the governance structure that's been established for crown corporations, which is different from departments in that they have a board of directors. We have had a number of audits over the years about governance of crown corporations, talking about how boards are selected, for example, how the presidents and CEOs are named, about the corporate plans that are presented to government. We did have an issue about the special examination reports, which were not made public, were not presented to Parliament, and that was addressed in budget of 2004. So there will be more information coming certainly to this committee about the special examinations of crown corporations, and we can talk about that obviously next week. And I think it would be a good idea to perhaps for crowns to have more hearings before Parliament, and that parliamentarians be better informed about their operations. They are very, very significant, both in terms of their financial impact, but also their public policy impact.
Yeah, it's rather strange when you do have crown corporations that are publicly in dispute with governments. I mean, you kind of wonder if you're an ordinary citizen, who's in control? But it's probably more complicated than that. But it's still an odd observation to have them publicly feuding over who should be in charge of things. I think Parliament should ultimately be in charge, not crown corporations. But you have something in the order of 600 plus employees, and I think for a lot of folks across the country, they probably figure everybody in your department is a chartered accountant, and I know that isn't correct. Could you give us an idea of the array of personnel you do have in your department, the expertise that's in the auditor's office?
With pleasure. We have about 450 people who are audit staff. Roughly half of those are professional accountants, so chartered accountants, CGAs or CMAs. The other half must have at least a master's degree. So we have people who have masters in public administration, in economics, in sociology, in environmental sciences, the whole gamut. And we also will go out and get people as required. I mean, at one point when we were doing a lot of work in health, we actually had a doctor on staff working with us. Then in our support group, we include people like Lynn will have responsibility for, our finance, human resources, IT shops. We also have legal services, knowledge management, communications, parliamentary liaison. I'm trying to think if I'm missing it. I hope I'm not missing anybody. And professional practice, all our professional practices, training. And in those groups as well, of course, a lot of them will have been people who came from the audit side and moved in, or people who have the specific expertise needed for that particular service.
Thank you.
I have a few areas, Ms. Fraser, I want to cover. First of all, in the, I'm going to be asking this committee within the next hour to vote on the recommendation to go to Parliament on the main estimates, which will recommend an appropriation of $72,239,000 plus statutory emissions of $9,620,000, which is a slight increase over the previous year, probably less than inflation. In your opinion, is that sufficient resources to operate your office for the 08-09 year?
Yes, we are very comfortable with that level of resources.
Now, the other area I just want to cover off is in previous appearances before this committee at this time of year, I believe it was the last one, there was an issue regarding labour relations and dispute between your office and Treasury Board. I guess the word uncomfortable would be the term I'd use. Has that been resolved? I don't see it mentioned this year.
Well, actually, Lynn and I had a very good meeting with the Secretary of the Treasury Board and his Assistant Secretary responsible for labour relations to try to clarify the process. Committee may recall that we believed that we had a mandate. We did our negotiation, arrived in an agreement with the unions, have to go back to have it all approved by the Treasury Board, and they did not want to approve it and delayed for a year before it finally got resolved. We've had two cases, I think, where we've had to go to mediation, and in fact the employees ended up getting more than what we had settled for, which seemed to me wasn't a very good process. Anyways, the employees were happy, but so we have reached, I think, an understanding of how the process will work. We are about to begin negotiations. I can perhaps ask Lynn to provide a little more commentary on where we actually are with all of that.
We have worked closely with Treasury Board over the last 6 months following that meeting to ensure that we were clear on their role and our role, and we are now just finalizing our mandate smoothly, I expect, and we'll negotiate within the next 30 days, ideally with our unions, for a fairly complex restructuring that I think everybody will be happy with.
The third area is more in the nature of a comment than a question, and I just want to pass on. I reviewed the reports and plans and priorities and the departmental performance reports, especially in the area of human resources and your turnover rate of 14%. I know you operate in a brutally competitive environment. There's a North American shortage of designated accounting professionals. That's reflected in turnover. It's reflected in wage rates. And I think if you ask the CEOs of the major 4 or 5 accounting firms, they don't enjoy those figures, and I'd say you're the envy of the accounting profession. So I do want to congratulate you and senior management in this very difficult environment, which I don't think it'll get any better for a whole host of reasons. And not only that, you're getting competition from within government. Absolutely. Because of the internal audit increases that we're seeing in all departments and Crown agencies. So it's I just want to congratulate you in that regard.
Thank you.
The other area, I just want a clarification. There was a legislative change a year and a half ago that gave your office authority to go in and audit money that was transferred to third-party organizations. Have you ever used that legislative authority, and do you see yourself using it?
There were two changes, actually. There was an initial change that allowed us to go in to organizations that have received more than $100 million over 5 years to perform performance audits. And that was largely to address our concerns about the foundations that had been established by government. And we have now audited 2 or 3 of the foundations, and hopefully will complete the larger ones over the next couple of years. There was then a subsequent change to expand that legislation to any recipient of a grant, contribution, or loan over $1 million over 5 years. We indicated at the time to government that we were not seeking that authority, that we did not think it appropriate for us to be out auditing individual recipients, that was really up to the departments or the Crown corporations involved to make sure that they were doing that, and that we would look at the systems and practices. So we have not gone to any third party outside government except for the foundations.
And the last point I want to raise with you, Mrs. Fraser, and you talked about the international accounting standards and accounting and auditing standards that you see changing and having a dramatic effect on your office. One issue that I have, and I've raised it before, and you probably know where I'm coming from, and that is domestic Canadian standards set by the Public Sector Accounting Board regarding the intergovernmental transfers of monies from the Government of Canada to provincial and territorial governments. And we're having a situation, and we're seeing it much more these days, in that the Government of Canada will transfer monies to provincial governments with absolutely no legislative accountability that it has to be spent. We've seen it in the Environmental Trust Fund, the Communities Trust Fund that was done a couple of months ago, the infrastructure funds that's transferred to the provincial government with absolutely no strings attached that it has to be spent on those issues that were voted by Parliament, debated, and the allocations made on that basis. And I know for a fact it's not been spent in those particular areas, but you're given to Parliament an opinion that it is being spent on that basis, and the provincial auditors are in turn given the very same opinion that everything is above board and there's no concerns. From a parliamentarian, this is totally contrary to my view of parliamentary government, democracy, and the Westminster system. So I have a concern with it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just and I know there's a kind of a dispute or fight within the Public Sector Accounting Board, but it just seems for me as chair of this committee, I look at it, I just shake my head. Why is this going on? And do you have any comment?
Two elements of comment. We share the concern about the lack of clarity, I think, over some of these transfers, and what people the people may think that there are conditions attached to them when there may not be. So we have a report actually coming, you'll see on the list in November of this year, the very last, a study of federal government transfers, certainly all the major transfers, to indicate to Parliament, are there conditions or not? And then it will be up to Parliament, of course, to decide if they wish to put transfers in when they vote for these conditions in when they vote for these transfers. The second issue revolves around the accounting for this. The federal government, if there are no conditions, when that transfer is made, it is recorded as an expense. The issue has been in the recipient provinces. There is a debate going on now that some of the provinces are actually spreading out these revenues over several years. And there's a debate as to whether, if there is no condition, why wouldn't they be recording it as revenue all in the year when they receive it? This is a project that's been going on, I think, for 4 or 5 years now. There is great debate in the community. There's a lot of debate, particularly from governments and preparers of financial statements, that do not want to see this money come in as revenue for a number of reasons. There's budget balanced budget legislation that it could affect. It will be a lot of variability in their finances, but there's a great resistance in the community to this. I'm hopeful that it can get resolved, but we may have to wait until there's actually an international standard on all this before it is resolved here in Canada.
But my only final comment is that the present system, the accounting treatment does not reflect the true economic nature of the transactions going on.
That's true.
Okay, we'll go to the second round, colleagues. 5 minutes. Mr. Belanger, second minute.
Madam Fraser.
Ms. Fraser, Ms. Sachs. In the performance report, the auditor, Welsh & Company, declares that the statements reflect faithfully the financial situation, etc., etc. And it's a common occurrence that the auditor also sends a letter to the client, and that letter is not a part of the statement or the financial statement. Is this the case in this particular instance? Has the auditor sent non-public remarks shared with the client? I know that last year we had some such letters, but not this year. So here's my question. What you received in the past, was the public document? No, at the time it was not a public document. But if I wanted this information through access to information, I won't get it? Answer, this was at a time that we were not subject to Access to Information Act, but if anyone wants it, I have no problem with that. And there was none of that this year for the year of March 31st, 2007.
In the estimates part 3, page 23, there's planned special examinations. It's just a question here. You've got one planned. This is the list for 2008, 2009, and yet you have one for 2010. Is that a typo, or are you anticipating already more than 2 years ahead of time?
No, as I said, we were not very good about meeting statutory deadlines, so we are working very hard to either move some earlier, 6 months earlier, and as well to, one of the other things we tried to do is schedule them so that we balance out the workload. We had a lot of special examinations that came at the same time, so if the Crown agreed, we would move some earlier. The Canada Council, for example, is 2010. This is new. They are this is one of the crowns that were previously exempt and now have to have one, so we've been trying to move them earlier so that we can balance out our workload.
I've got a limited time, so I hesitate to tackle complex matters, but I'll try to tackle one and then perhaps come back to this. You mentioned in your opening remarks, and I again find in the part 3, the matter of preserving the independence of officers of Parliament. That is a very, very serious matter. And you say that in here you've provided Treasury Board Secretariat with 5 working principles, which you believe would guide the application of government policies to officers, plural, officers of Parliament. Have these working principles been shared with a committee before?
No, I believe they were shared with the panel. They were shared with the panel on funding and oversight of the officers of Parliament.
Do they all apply to funding?
It's not only funding; it's administrative policies
Would you therefore
as well.
be prepared to share that document with this committee?
Absolutely.
I think that's a very important. Would you also keep us advised periodically of the progress of your discussions with the Treasury Board Secretariat in terms of the acceptance and application of these principles?
I would be glad to do that. I just give you briefly. What we have done is gone through all of the policies to determine which aspects, it's not necessarily the whole policy, there could be specific aspects of a policy, are most problematic. We're doing this on behalf of all the officers of Parliament, so it's a working group of all the officers. We have identified, I think, about 20 or 25 policies that we believe are more problematic. And what we are doing is discussing with the Treasury Board Secretariat what is the issue, why we think it's a problem, and what do we propose as an alternative. It could be more public disclosure, it could be, there's different ways of doing it. So those discussions have begun.
Are you keeping parliamentarians involved with this discussion? Because we have a keen interest in this, and on un intérêt évident.
I would be glad to. We have been largely working with the panel of funding and oversight, and that's where we've been doing this, but I can certainly give this committee regular updates and share that information with the committee. I'd be pleased to do so.
Well, I hope that I have a chance to come back. I heard some bell here, but am I allowed to continue?
You're out of time, Mr.
Oh, I wish I'd had
You're
as
just
much
getting
time
going.
as the chair.
It's the chair's prerogative. We can go back to you if your colleagues let you. Monsieur Petit.
Bonjour, Madame Sack.
Good afternoon, Ms. Sachs, and I have a question. When people look at us, you are the Auditor General, and you're the kind of person, and I'm using a term in the public image. I don't want to say that you're a policeman, but I won't use the term police, but you're monitoring something. And in my writing, We have questions, and in the mandate that you have to apply in 2008, I don't know if you'll be able to cover all that, but there are 2 or 3 mandates, and I don't know. I don't really know if you'll be able to carry out all those mandates without the money. But there's one mandate that interests me. It's the federal, provincial, territorial transfers. In Quebec, this is a very sensitive issue. As soon as you come up with that, everyone's eyes open wide. What are you doing there? Do we have this in our court? And you have a fairly sizable, hefty mandate. So by 2008, can you carry out this huge study of federal, provincial, territorial transfers? This is immense. Answer. We will try to indicate the main transfer payments and whether or not conditions are attached to them, very simply. We'll give the description of the payment, the amount, and we will not split this by province or anything else, and we're not going to ask the province what it did with the money. This is simply information for Parliament, because there are quite a few parliamentarians, when they see the title of transfer payment. We had one case for medical equipment, was transfer to the provinces for medical equipment, and there was no condition stating that they had to buy medical equipment with it. So we simply want to inform the Parliament so that they would know what the transfers are and whether any conditions are attached to them. This is more or less what we want to do. If I understand you properly, you're going to explain the transfer and the federal conditions, but you don't go to see whether the provinces actually did that with their money. No, I don't have a mandate to do that. Second and final question. My people asked me to put this question to you. The people in my riding often see that the government is giving money to foreign countries through CEDA. In November 2009, I would like to know whether this point, CEDA aid to targeted countries. So the question that I'm putting you, is this the right question? Will this really be in 2009, in November 2009, that this will be studied? When my riding knows that you're going to send $300 million to a country XYZ, they have some doubts about this. Are you going to look at it? Answer, yes, we'll look at the aid that is provided and how the decisions are made and what kind of accountability there is, are the rules followed, etc. Of course, we won't be able to do all of the CEDA aid programs, but we will target a few of the main ones. Mr. Chairman, can I just put another question to wind up the question about the targeted countries that you're going to study? Are you going to ask for the mandate to go there? Are you going to cover things broadly or only by targeting certain sectors? Answer, it's up to us to decide, and we haven't audited CEDA for the past 4 years. This has been quite a while. And, of course, this is a very important part of things, and we're going to take a few countries, not all those countries, but the main ones, to see how the programs are run. A final question. For transfers, you're going to see whether the transfer got to the country that it was intended for, and once you got there, did the money go to the right destination? Because we're talking about third parties, not provinces. Answer, for provincial transfers, we just want to do a study for information, whereas the CEDA operation is an auditing operation, and we'll audit CEDA to see whether it has observed all its policies and whether it has reached its intended objectives. So it is an audit. Thank you very much, Mr. Petit. Mr. Godet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your impartiality and your non-partisan stance. I have a question. Who asked you to audit the transfers? Did that come from you, or did the government ask you to do it? Answer: no, this came from us. There was a bit of confusion regarding the terms of certain transfers, and we thought that it would be good to clarify any attached conditions to the transfers, if any. And this really came from us. Thank you. My other question is, why changed the accounting standards? In a previous incarnation, I was in the department, and they kept changing accounting rules. And is it a make-work scheme for accountants? Because our accountants are swarming all over everything, in every community organization, and you even have an accountant in a tiny notary's office. Well, this big change comes about because we're trying to harmonize with international standards, and the capital market has a certain international standard that is uniform for the way that financial statements are presented. For some time we tried to harmonize with the USA, and now people realize that we have to go further than that. And the International Standards Development Councils are driving this change. And several European countries have already done this. England has already done it, and quite a few countries are going through this right now. This is just an observation. When the government changed in Quebec, they changed the accounting standards, and everybody complains that they don't understand anything. Is this going to have the same result, that nobody will be able to understand what's going on? Answer: we'll try to get better information that's more comparable with other countries. If a department does not respond to your recommendations, do you have any kind of clout? Can you come back to the House of Commons and denounce this or that department for not following your suggestions? Answer: the only thing that we can do is we have a power to recommend, we have a power to make a follow-up, which we do. Every year we choose a certain number of audits, and we follow them up to see whether the recommendations were implemented or not. And after that, that's all. I know that in our municipality, the accountant made recommendations in private, and if they were not followed, well, he repeated the recommendations, because if you don't do it, someone else will, or another organization or another government will do it. And without naming any department, let's say Department X, is flouting my recommendations. So can you point out a problem like this? Answer: we can do a follow-up, and we have a yearly report with follow-ups on several audits that were presented to the committee, and I think that we've all become more stringent in our follow-ups, and we expect a detailed action plan from the department to show how he will implement the measures, and the department communications committees will also help us to get a better result. But you're accountable to the House of Commons and not to the government. It would be good for you to come back to the House of Commons and report what recommendations have been followed or not. You've been recommending the same thing for 5 years, or 60% of the recommendations haven't been followed. The department has a problem. Well, the problem that we have is that we're not in every department every year, and we don't raise every issue every year either. So we might find it kind of difficult to target operations if recommendations have not been followed, because we can't tell really what kind of obstacles they encountered. So we want the government to do the follow-up, and that the government should be able to give accounts of its department's performance. Just a brief question. With the question that Mr. Pelletier just put regarding the audit of the transfers that you're about to do, are you going to see whether the transfer money is well spent? And are you going to verify, are you going to do this audit to see whether the money was transferred into programs rather, or is it used in some field that the province has already invested in the past? Sometimes it looks like a reimbursement of money that should be invested in the province. We don't automatically audit the transfers of the provinces because each province has its own legislative auditor if any conditions were attached to a transfer. Depending on the conditions, we could ask the federal department to tell us how they have made sure that the conditions are observed. But it would not be up to us to do that. It would be up to us to ask the department to describe their way of carrying out the follow-up. So our work always comes, always rotates out federal departments and not provinces.
And thank you. Thanks, Madam Fraser, for coming today. It's always a pleasure to have you here. I want to start by following up, I think, on what Mr. Holland was asking about. He was talking about the 46% fully implemented, the 26% substantially implemented. Do you track the 28% that are not implemented in terms of the reasons that are given for not implementing?
No, we haven't. We know which ones they are. We obviously have a database of all of the recommendations. We do go back when we do our follow-up audits because we know that some of those will, of course, follow in our follow-up audits where we are judging the progress is not satisfactory.
Right.
We don't always go into the reasons why. We have done it in one particular case when we did a pretty extensive follow-up in Indian Northern Affairs. We did try to then determine why some recommendations were put into practice and others weren't.
Right, because it would seem like there would be a big difference between someone not following up a recommendation because they don't agree with it versus not following it up because they're just not doing their jobs. Or...
In all of these cases where we are following up our recommendations, it's because the department has said they have agreed. Now,
okay.
I guess one could ask the question, did they really agree? Because it's easier to say you agree at the time than to say you don't agree. And we are certainly trying to work more closely with departments to discuss recommendations earlier on in the process as well to make sure that they are recommendations that they feel are doable and which they believe will address the question.
Right.
But I think, I would not be honest, I think, to say that there aren't recommendations with which government says they agree, and probably fundamentally they don't.
Right, right. Do you ever take a look at the recommendations that you've made retrospectively and assess almost a measure of the quality of the recommendations? Do you have a process for that?
Yes. We actually had a fair bit of work done about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago because we realized that a part of the issue might be the recommendations themselves, if they are not clear enough, specific enough, too general, maybe too sweeping. So how can you actually ever implement something like that? And we gave more guidance to the teams as to how they should write the recommendations. And that is when we said, too, that we have to start. At the time, it almost used to be at the very end of the audit that we would be working on the recommendations. We said the teams have to work much closer move the issue up and work with more senior management as well in developing the recommendations.
Now, when Mr. Sweet was asking questions, he was talking a little bit about your external audits, the peer reviews that are done for you. I think you said your last one was in 2004. Who does those?
When we did the one on the financial audit practice, it was a major accounting firm because they obviously are familiar with all financial audits. When we did the performance audit, we went to our international colleagues and had an international team. It was led by the National Audit Office of Great Britain with the audit offices of France, Norway, and Netherlands that did the review of our office. We were the first to actually do that kind of peer review, and since then it has actually become a practice that's taken hold. We have done and are actually about to finish the second one. The review led the review of the GAO in the U.S. We are also leading the review of the European Court of Audit and have participated in several others. So we will be asking international colleagues to do the review. And the committee, anyways, at some future time, what actually was very striking to me was actually how very different the systems of audit are. One would expect perhaps auditors general are all the same. Well, we're not, and even within the Westminster system, the way we operate is quite different from our colleagues, say, in the UK.
I guess I got time for one more question. Just taking a look at the appendix number 1 here, I'll make it kind of a two-part question just to get two in here. You show 92% of parliamentary committee members find your performance audits add value. So I'd be curious what, and I know it's only 8%, but still that adds up to about 24, 25 members across the whole House that maybe don't find they have add value. Do you have any feedback on what you might improve? And the second question was regarding your target for the number of parliamentary hearings and briefings you're going to participate in. I see that you participated in 64 in 06-07, but your target is only 40 for 08-09. I'm just wondering how you're going to accomplish that.
First, on the parliamentary committee members, we surveyed 4 committees. We didn't do a survey of all parliamentarians. So the 8%, I think, was 2 or 3 people.
Okay.
And we didn't get a lot of feedback on that. I guess some people just didn't think it was, and it was not only public accounts, for example. We did Senate National Finance and the 2 environment committees. And I can understand that some people may not think it's particularly useful to them if they're studying legislation, or the kind of work may not have lined up with their work plan. The number of hearings, 64 was a record. We have never, ever done that many. 40 we think is more in line with what we've done in the past years, but in the current parliamentary calendar, I'm not sure that we're actually going to meet the we'll have to see. I mean,
depends what it looks like at that point.
Depends on if the committees call us, in part. I mean, we will try to obviously get committees interested in our work, but it'll depend if there are other projects that committees are working on, if we attend or not.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lake. And Mr. Christopherson, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I just have one more area I'd like to follow up on. In your opening remarks, point 19, you state, and I'm quoting, "Presently, management and other policies that government central agencies issue apply to officers of Parliament in the same way they apply to government departments and agencies. This is a concern to us and other officers of Parliament. It does not recognize the independence of officers of Parliament and the management autonomy needed to protect our independence," end quote. And of course, the distinction between officers of Parliament and virtually everybody else is that you answer to the House as a whole. To Parliament, you don't answer to the government, and others do. And if I'm understanding this, there are edicts being sent out, and your concern is that you're being expected to follow those, you being the officers of Parliament, and this is a concern. Can you expand on that so I can more fully understand what your concern is?
I'd be glad to. In the Financial Administration Act, there are a number of schedules that list departments and agencies. We and other officers of Parliament are on schedule we call 1.1, which lists all the departments and agencies, including the Office of the Auditor General and others. So when the Treasury Board Secretariat issues a policy, it'll say it applies to all the entities listed in Schedule 1.1. they don't think that maybe officers of Parliament should not be subject to some of the conditions or some of the policies. Recently, there's a draft, for example, a draft communication policy going around that would have all communication strategies, all communications, everything go through Privy Council office. Well, I can tell you there is no way that my press releases about my report are going to go to Privy Council office, or our communication strategies are going to be vetted by Privy Council office. So, and government, I think the Treasury Board Secretariat, recognizes that this is an issue. They do recognize now it's how do we resolve this, and there has, I think, been an understanding over many years that you just don't apply that. But then, of course, I have an internal audit that tells me, well, you should have had all your hospitality expenses signed by a minister, and I'm saying, no way. So I say, I want this clarified, and all of the officers of Parliament also agree. We're working together on this. So we have identified, as I mentioned earlier, about 25 policies that we believe there are certain conditions that are problematic, that have a role for a minister or a central agency that we think is inappropriate. And we are working with the Secretariat. I hope that we can resolve it with them. If not, we will certainly be back to Parliament. When we brought it up with the panel on oversight and funding, they were very supportive of the officers of Parliament to say that, yes, this was an important issue, that we should be resolving it. And we would like clear decision by the Treasury Board that these particular items do not apply to us, and that we would have some compensating or other mechanism, probably more disclosure on those items.
Now, that's a unanimous position of all the officers of Parliament?
Yes.
Are there any that are bowing to the edict now and going to appeal it, or are they all taking the same approach to you, which is, this is not right, I'm not going to do it, and we'll work on...
I think they're pretty much not. Now, some of them are a little different from us because they are subject to certain procedures or rules that we are not. For example, the Office of the Auditor General has the status of a separate employer, so we do our own hiring, our own classification. The other officers of Parliament are not, so they have to follow the human resource regime, which again poses certain issues for them as well, in addition to us. But I would say generally, I think we're all on the same page on this, and I do sense that the Treasury Board Secretariat certainly understands the issue. How we're going to resolve it may be a bit more problematic.
Well, given the fact, Chair, that this is a body of accountability, that's entirely what we do, and this issue is about accountability, it seems to me this is one that we would have an interest in staying very close to. Perhaps through you, I could ask the Auditor General to provide us with maybe a briefing note that outlines just what you've said, but also the time frames expected, and then request to you, and if I need to put this in a motion, Chair, I can, but maybe on a timely basis you would come to us with an update, because if there's a problem with your relationship, then we can extrapolate that to others, and there aren't as many. I don't think there's any other body that really, outside of government itself, that's as well equipped to deal with the issue of accountability, independence, and the relationship between officers of the House and Parliament itself than this body. So perhaps we are in a position to accept some leadership on this and make sure that it does resolve in a way that's acceptable.
And if the auditor agrees to provide that information,
I'd be pleased to. I've already indicated that I would do so.
Very good. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Mr. Boulanger, 5 minutes.
In the same vein, Mr. Chair.
Monsieur le Président.
Steering Committee to consider that perhaps we ought to dedicate a meeting specifically to this matter once we have the list of the policies, the 5 proposed principles, so that indeed this can be aired a bit more publicly in terms of, because if we have a difficulty in preserving the autonomy of agents of Parliament, then we've got a serious problem. And I think I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that you consider that possibility. Madame Fraser, je vous ai écouté attentivement, j'ai relu.
I listened closely to your words, and I read them through this morning. And I see a proposal to 2008, 2009. You have plans up to 2010. And my question has to do with flexibility. I know that sometimes your office has a hard time getting through the work in time, and there's quite a hefty workload. So how much flexibility do you have in your office to undertake work that comes up suddenly or that's asked for by Parliament? For example, the sale of a building where Public Works is selling buildings, and then on the other hand signing 25-year contracts with options to buy. So I don't know if you've looked into these kind of things. I think personally that these things should be looked at, and then they should be presented to Parliament. So do you have any kind of leeway for choosing different work that you can undertake, either because the Parliament suddenly asks for something or an emergency comes up? Answer: we have 75% of statutory work with the financial and special audits, and we have deadlines, and this has to be done on a yearly basis. We're a bit more flexible in auditing management. Usually such an audit takes about 18 months from the beginning of the audit to the tabling of the report. If an emergency comes up, then we usually have to reassign personnel. Sometimes we can get people on contract, perhaps former employees or others, who can complement our personnel for specific mandates. And we're looking for people with certain skills and certain knowledge, and to some extent we're limited by our personnel, by our staff and our availability. But we're in a very competitive world for keeping personnel. We can't tell somebody, wait, you're on standby, we're waiting for something to happen. Our people all have to have a schedule. They have to know what kind of work they're going to be doing ahead of time and whether that work will be in their interest. And so everyone is booked, and we can change the booking to some extent, not very much, but we can stop some mandates and start new ones. And regarding the sale of buildings, of course, we're going to look at this year in our public accounts audit. Thank you.
Madam Fraser, you had mentioned that there's a schedule of 25 policies that you believe would jeopardize your independence as an officer of Parliament. Could you table that with yes. Our committee as well? Yes. Thank you. And when exactly did this particular edict that you mentioned come down, that all departments, including officers of Parliament, have to provide their communications to the Privy Council?
I believe this is a draft policy, a new communications policy, but I believe it was in the old communications policy, but even previous to that. But I can certainly provide that information to the committee. Yeah.
That's, I think, perhaps to illustrate how problematic that may be, especially you mentioned your press releases. When we see trends going in the wrong direction recently, previously, 19% of recommendations agreed to by departments were not acted upon, approximately 1 out of every 5, and presently we're at 28%. We're approaching 1 out of every 3 recommendations agreed to but not being acted upon, and notwithstanding the fact that you've become more rigorous in requesting action plans. When you connect those two, you can see how problematic this particular attempt at an edict would in fact be.
Well, I personally don't see a connection between the two. I think the recommendations can vary a lot year to year, just depending upon which departments we went into, which issues we looked at. If it was the same issues year after year, one might be able to do a trend line, but I think we have to look at it more globally than that. There probably should be a little more analysis, and we can see if we can provide some more analysis perhaps in our departmental performance report for this coming year. If we see any particular reasons for an improvement or a decrease in the implementation of recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fraser. That, colleagues, concludes the second round, and on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you very much, Ms. Fraser, Ms. Sachs, for your appearance here today, and on behalf of all committee members, I want to thank you very much for your continued excellent work on behalf of Parliament and on behalf of all Canadians. Before you leave, colleagues, we do have a motion regarding the estimates, but before we put the motion, which shouldn't take very long, I want to ask Ms. Fraser if she's got any closing remarks she wants to address to the committee.
Well, I would very much like to thank the committee for its interest in our work. I truly believe that we would not be effective if it were not for the parliamentary hearings and the interest of this committee. So your hearings really do make our work meaningful, and I look forward to continuing to work with you over the next year. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Colleagues, to conclude the discussion on the estimates, the chair will now going to put the vote to the committee, and I'll read it to you. Shall vote 15 in the amount of $72,239,000 less the amount of $18,059,750 granted in interim supply under the Department of Finance carry, and shall I, the chair, report this approval to the House. So moved by Mr. Christopherson. Any discussion? All in favour, raise your hands. Contrary-minded, motion carried. Okay, I want to thank you again. I just want to remind colleagues that on Thursday we do have a 3-hour meeting starting at 11 o'clock. Lunch will be served. We do have for the first hour Mr. Kevin Page, the new Parliamentary Budget Officer, and then from 12 to 2 we have the Greening Government Operations, and we're having before us the Commissioner of Environmental Sustainability. So thank you very much, and I will adjourn the meeting.